Hey gang, this week's episode is brought to you by 417 Helmets. It's collectible helmets and more. Mini football helmets from just about every dead and forgotten football league you've ever heard of. Also, mini baseball helmets from the Negro Leagues, as well as custom helmets. You want your business or your organization represented in a cool mini helmet format? Hey, check them out. 417helmets.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases. And now, here's our show.
Rudy Glenn. Here's Glenn with the shot and the deflection. It's in the net.
So we can go back to tension and excitement time now, because now the pressure is really on Bob Yarushi, who is the last kicker in this series of 5 kicks.
Bob Yarushi, he is from Toronto. Here comes the kick. If he makes it, they're still tied. If he misses, it's over. Chicago has won. The Chicago Sting has won their first professional sports championship since 1963. This group of men under the leadership of Willie Roy takes it to a shootout. Rudy Glenn scores, Bob Yarushi misses, and the Sting are the 1981 Soccer Bowl champions.
Welcome to Good Seats Still Available, a curious little podcast devoted to exploring what used to be in professional sports. Here's your host, Tim Hanlon.
Well, all right now. How are you, everybody? My name is Tim Hanlon. Welcome to the proceedings. We like to call it Good Seats Still Available, the curious little podcast that is devoted to, on a weekly basis, I might add, what used to be in professional sports. Thank you for joining us for this week's fun and frivolity. And I think we'll have a little accent on the frivolity. It's certainly going to be fun, of course, as we try to make it each and every week. But we get lots of mail, shall we say. And you never know who's going to be listening to this little show. You never know how they find out about this show. You never know what sort of spurs their interest or whatever. But a couple of weeks back, we got just a very sort of a lovely but very quick and short note. And it was just titled in the subject line there, Great History, period. That was it. And this gentleman who kindly reached out to us said that he had heard a couple of really old episodes of ours from our very first year, as a matter of fact, 5 some odd years ago. Our great conversations with the great Michael Menchel, which we reposted a few weeks back as an archive special. And Terry Hansen from back in the day. We talked about Atlanta Chiefs and that kind of stuff from that episode. And the guy's name is Charlie Evranian. And in his little note, he basically said, hey, heard those episodes with 2 of my old friends. And then he attached a couple of pictures and an article or 2. And the curiosity thread just had to be pulled from there. The picture Charlie sent was of Ralph Garr from 1976. It's a very famous and iconic picture. Minnie Minoso is behind him, a Chicago White Sox game. And they're both wearing, or maybe they're more famous for what they're not wearing. They're wearing shorts, Chicago White Sox shorts. Charlie Evranian was part of the front office of the Chicago White Sox at that time during that quite bold and extraordinary time when Bill Veeck owned the team in the mid-'70s. The dramatic change of the uniforms and the logo back in the day, some of which still is very much fondly remembered. The stylized socks across the top, sort of in a modern day, at least for this 1970s. But this picture, of course, it's almost iconic at this point. The handful of games that the Chicago White Sox played in shorts. Charlie was part of that mixture as to how that came about. And that's just kind of the midpoint of this amazing sports history story of Charlie Evranian. After doing some more research, we found that our pal Andy Crossley did an interview with Charlie back in 19. I'm really dating myself. 2018. And it became a great shorthand for what just had to be a guest spot here on this little show. And we're going to get into all kinds of crazy forgotten sports stuff, all packaged up in the one dynamo presence of one Charlie Evranian coming up in a few minutes. The Chicago Sting being a prime example of Charlie's sports history. It's practically the first chapter of a multifaceted, almost Renaissance career. Charlie went on to run various state fairs, and was in the Ohio state government, and all kinds of charitable work and stuff. I mean, this is a guy who's done so many different things in his life. But the first, I would say, third or maybe quarter of his professional career was almost exclusively devoted to minor and in some cases major league professional sports stuff, a bunch of which, sadly but happily for us, are no longer around, and thus qualifying to talk about this about that stuff on this little show. The Chicago Sting, as you heard on that clip, was the place Charlie went to. He became president of the Chicago Sting from the Chicago White Sox experience, and was there and part of the dynamic that ultimately took the Lee Stern-owned team, it having been one of the longer-lasting teams in the NASL, but frankly not really tremendously fan-supported. But 1981, and by the way, speaking as a Cosmos fan growing up in the day, the Chicago Sting always had the Cosmos number, it seemed, and that clip was probably the ultimate expression of that, shall we call it, mini dominance that the Sting had. That was the well, depending on when you were listening, what was the date of that? Well, you're probably yelling into your devices now. It was September 26, 1981, live on, well, it wasn't live. That's the key. From Exhibition Stadium in Toronto with Soccer Bowl 81. That's where the Chicago Sting climbed the mountain and knocked off the mighty Cosmos, the first and only time that the mighty Cosmos lost in an NASL Outdoor Championship match. It was a 0-0 tie, and they won it in a shootout, the Sting did. And yes, yours truly was there, 36,000 or so in the stadium, and every one of them seemed to be a Chicago Sting fan. Certainly after the game, that's for sure, because nobody expected it. But Charlie Evranian, I'm thinking of auto racing, and the name just kind of confuses. Charlie Evranian, as president of that team, that year, 1981, it was just a gigantic ascendance for that team in the pantheon of Chicago sports lore. Chicago's a tough sports town, no doubt about it. And arguably, that's the first 6 or 7 years of the Sting's existence. Despite everything that Lee Stern and his friends could throw at the market, you couldn't find a guy who was more visible than Lee Stern, and all kinds of promotions and locations and all kinds of stuff. But it all came together, and Charlie was at the helm at that point. And boy, what a parade they had a couple of days later in Chicago. People still remember it. Jane Byrne and the trophy, and it was a ticker tape parade, and it was the first time in more than a dozen or almost two dozen years at that point that Chicago had won a major sports title of any sort. So Chicago was in a partying mood, and the Sting were the recipients. I had jammed a reception at O'Hare Airport when they came back for the game. Blah blah blah. But that clip was from ABC Sports, and that was a guest we'd like to have at some point. Vern Lundquist, a young and debonair and a very soccer-infused background of Vern Lundquist with Paul Gartner, one of our previous episode guests as well. It's a great episode to spin up for yourselves. Kind of announcing there the dramatic win of the Chicago Sting. Now, sadly, the people in Chicago and New York were not able to watch that game live. It was on a Saturday night on ABC, and ABC at that point was in the third of its 3-year deal with the North American Soccer League, and they'd kind of had enough. ABC had the games that they were broadcasting on weekends in the middle of the summer, very irregularly, I might add. Were not drawing well. Now, by today's standards, they were drawing gigantic numbers, but back in the day, a 3 or a 4 rating on a Sunday afternoon wasn't cutting it. But in Chicago and New York, the ABC owned and operated stations made their case, and at least got the game to be played in a tape delay fashion after Fantasy Island and the Love Boat were on. So you know where the priorities were for ABC at that time in 1981. The rest of the country didn't get to see the game until Sunday afternoon, the day after. And it's a shame because it's probably one of the more exciting and consequential games in the NASL's history. And you can't beat it for drama, even though it was a 0-0 regular time and overtime result before they went to the shootout. And the shootout, of course, was dramatic too. It was a hell of a 0-0 game. It's one of those games where 0-0 was wow. And it's worth a watch if you find it on YouTube and stuff. But Charlie was there. He was president at the time. But that was preceded by a whole bunch of minor league exploits, including being in the farm system, working general managing teams in the Atlanta Braves farm system. That's where he met Terry Hansen along the way. Working with the Atlanta Braves at the top level, but places like the Greenwood Braves in the single A minor leagues back in the day. Charlie was the manager and co-owner and chief cook and bottle washer of the Richmond, Virginia American Hockey League team known as the Richmond Robins. He was part of that mix. Bill Veeck enters the story. Pat Williams is part of the story. And after even the Sting, the Major Indoor Soccer League is part of this story, and in particular, a story that you must stick around for. We've never talked about it before. It's rarely, I don't think I've even heard it anywhere else. It's the incredible story of the Phoenix Inferno of the MISL. And let's put it this way. You think ownership was a shaky proposition in lots of these startup leagues and challenger leagues we talk about and stuff. World Football League, great example. Well, wait till you hear the source of the money and the operation behind the Phoenix Inferno of the MISL. Joe Garagiola makes an appearance in this story. So does Stan Musial. It's a really, really interesting. And to top it all off, we even give us a subtle hint into the end of a thing called Team America from the NASL back in 1983, and the role of Charlie and even Earl Foreman, the founder of the MISL, why he and they were involved in the Team America story in the North American Soccer League. We get into all of that stuff and much, much more. This is a wild ride through lots of things in minor league and major league professional sports forgottenness with our guest this week, Charlie Evranian. It's a fun one, and it's coming up for you in a few moments' time. How about some promotional stuff? Let's reminisce about some of these great teams that we're going to be sort of traversing. How about our pal Kevin Schultz and VintageIceHockey.com? Lots of great stuff there. If you remember teams from various minor league hockey situations, whether they're around today or long forgotten, AHL, IHL, USHL, pick a something HL, they're probably there for you at VintageHockey.com. Promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases, and including the really cool looking and kind of sort of curious and up to possibly no good looking Richmond Robin logo. Let's remember, shall we, the 1971 to 76 American Hockey League Richmond Robins that our guest Charlie Evranian was president and head of. You can find great wear and mugs and all kinds of other things with that great Richmond Robins white, gray, red, and yellow logo at VintageHockey.com, and you'll find lots of other great team logos there too, and merch for those logos. And again, that promo code for you there is Good Seats for 10% off all of your purchases there. And last but not least, how about tooling over to oldschoolshirts.com? Yeah, our pal P.F. Wilson in beautiful Cincinnati, Ohio. Promo code for you there at oldschoolshirts.com is Good Seats for 10% off all your purchases there. And there you will find a whole bunch of stuff, including aforementioned a Chicago Sting. You can get the Chicago Sting classic logo with that sort of the Sting movie, sort of a angry bee with the soccer ball in it. You can also find the Soccer Bowl 81 logo t-shirt at oldschoolshirts.com, promo code GOODSEATS. It's a great red, white, and blue soccer bowl logo. They were doing some darn good logos back in the early 80s in the NASL. And also, you will find, believe it or not, on oldschoolshirts.com in the MISL section, or in the Phoenix, Arizona section, the Phoenix Inferno. Yes, 3 years in the MISL. And you may have remembered a game on the old USA Network or two. When they scored a goal, you saw those Inferno-like flames, shoots of flames come up from the goal line, behind the goal. They didn't need a goal judge. They just used those cannons of fire behind the scenes. Anyway, all that for you and more at oldschoolshirts.com, promo code GOODSEATS. So thank you to both of those great sites for their continued sponsorship of the show. We appreciate it. And now, without further ado, let's get into all kinds of shenanigans with a one-of-a-kind guy, a Renaissance guy. And like I said, the first part of his professional career, it started way back when as basically a sort of an intern, if you will, the old Detroit Tigers in baseball, and it kind of morphed from there. Here's our conversation with the great Charlie Evranian. This is a hoot. Please, as always, enjoy. So let's back up, because my mind immediately goes to when seeing a bit of your background and understanding sort of where you sort of have fit into our little realm of forgottenness and defunctness and stuff. The term MISL Mafia comes to mind, and it's frankly something just popped into my head only because people like Doug Verb and Michael Minchell and a few others who have sort of either deeply or casually sort of sailed across those major indoor soccer waters, and you were no stranger to that. But I'm probably jumping ahead in the story, but there seems to have been, I guess, to start, a band of merry men, and I guess they were mostly men, that kind of were behind the scenes of this crazy indoor soccer league back in the day, and you were, I guess, one of them.
Well, I was recruited by Earl Foreman. Earl and I go back to when he owned the Virginia Squires, and I was running a minor league hockey team in Richmond, Virginia. And Earl approached me about coming on board with the Squires, and we couldn't work things out. So after I got involved in soccer, Earl reached out to me a few years later and said, "Look, I'd like for you to come with me as deputy commissioner." And he painted a future and this, that, and the other. And we sat down and worked things out. And it was a neat group of folks.
All right, well, let me back up. How are you in the minor league hockey racket in the first place? How did you get there? And then we'll get to Earl, because he's an enigma all himself.
Well, I started with the Atlanta Braves in their general managing their minor league farm system. And then after 2 years at Greenwood, South Carolina, the Braves moved me to Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm sorry, this was a career calling, say, coming out of college or high school or what?
Actually, I started my career in sports in 1962 in Detroit, wiping off seats and working in the clubhouse. And just did a lot of odd jobs for the Detroit Tigers.
The old Tiger Stadium, huh?
Oh, boy, that was quite the place.
So how does that morph then from sort of those, I'm guessing that was as a child, sort of those sort of odd jobs and in the stadium stuff. How does that morph career-wise into a path where you get into the Braves organization? And what year are we talking there?
Let me see. I went to school in Atlanta for some radio, television broadcasting, and I wrote the Tigers for a job in 1967 to see if I could come back to Detroit, and there was nothing available. So I figured, as long as I'm in Atlanta, let me go knock on somebody's door with the Atlanta Braves. And lo and behold, I landed a job in spring training with the Atlanta Braves. And one day Paul Richards came by, and I said, "Mr. Richards, how does one make a career out of baseball?" He says, "I'll come by and talk to you one day, son." Well, he did. A couple of weeks later, Paul came by with his golf cart, And he said, okay, I'll remember you. Then in the winter of 1967, I get a call from Eddie Robinson offering me a general manager's job of a team in the Western Carolinas League in 1968. I was 19 years old.
And that was what division or class was that of the Braves at that point?
That was Class A. The Braves were one of the only teams in baseball that owned all of their farm clubs, and Greenwood was Class A.
So this is essentially fresh, straight out of high school, and you're already starting to do the hustle, so to speak, if you will, in sport.
Right out of high school. During high school, I was bat boy for the Tigers, and then right after high school, I had a brief stint with the Detroit Free Press, delivering advertising. Then the Tigers called and offered me a job as an office boy. And I got to learn the ropes of all the different departments at Tiger Stadium. Then I went away to school, and that's when I hooked up with the Braves.
Interesting. And what was your first job or set of jobs then? I mean, you're essentially going right out to the farm. That's not even in the central office, right? So I'm guessing you were really kind of learning on the job, and maybe not without a lot of shall we say, day-to-day support or guardrails, so to speak?
Well, I spent a month in Atlanta as the business people firmed up the franchise in Greenwood, and took full advantage of that time to meet with every department head, learn the ins and outs of ticketing, public relations, marketing, advertising, radio, television, you name the department, accounting. And then the day came and they said, okay, mister, time for you to head down to Greenwood. And we had about 8 or 10 weeks to start up a franchise from scratch. Actually, the field was under construction in Greenwood, South Carolina, and had a good tutor and mentor, and Lou Fitzgerald was our manager, and had some pretty decent ball players on that Greenwood team. We won the first half championship and then played Spartanburg, my friend Pat Williams' team, and we won the Western Carolina League championship in 1968 and then again in 1969.
Okay, so is this dumb luck or true just knowledge and wisdom beyond your years at this point?
Well, I'm not going to call it dumb luck because I had a lot of good mentors shoveling information my way. Minor league general managers have very little to say over player personnel, and Atlanta stocked that team with some good players at that time. Players like Dusty Baker in his rookie year right out of high school. Bob Didier, a catcher, Earl Williams, who went on to become American League Rookie of the Year, and we had some good ball players.
This is also in late 1960s Atlanta and or Deep South, right? So I'm also guessing, some real raw, challenging, lingering, and certainly given the explosive times in the late 60s around racial issues as well. I'm sure more than a few stories, maybe some whimsical, but probably a lot of them maybe not so, about some of those players and then some.
Well, coming from Detroit, I didn't have any racial bias. I grew up with a lot of people of color, and it was not a problem for me. It was just a matter of adapting in the city that we were in. But on one particular road trip to Rock Hill, South Carolina, our bus pulls up and the general manager comes out to greet us. And he says, I'm sorry, you've got some people of color and black players on your team and you can't stay here. I said, well, I guess like the whole league will pull out of your hotel. He said, no, they won't do that. I said, well, I'm going to go make some phone calls. And if you don't want to accept my players, I'm sure the other general managers don't want to stay at your hotel either. And Earl Williams from Montclair, New Jersey, was front and center for that argument. Long and the short of it, we made peace with the general manager, and he made an exception, he said.
Wink, wink, I guess.
Wink, wink. And we, There was only one hotel in Greenwood, South Carolina, and that was a Holiday Inn. That was not a problem for us. Finding housing for the players of color was not a real challenge because the community stepped up, and we found a place for most players called the Oak Grove Cafe, which wasn't too far from the ballpark, that the players could walk if need be, and their meals were taken care of. But we wanted to make sure that the players felt comfortable, needed, and were at ease to play baseball.
All right, so give me a sense then, or give our audience a sense of what general managing or front office managing a team like this entails and you encountered. Is that, promotions, ticket sales, operational stuff at the stadium, probably a little bit of everything, I'm assuming.
In today's world, you walk into a minor league operation at a Class A level, and you're probably going to find 15, 18, 20 people doing all the different jobs that a minor league general manager did. I had a part-time secretary, full-time groundskeeper, and that was it. You did it all. So we worked out a deal with the radio station. You sold tickets. You spoke at different clubs. You sold advertising. You made arrangements for food, bus trips, transferring players in and out of town. You were pretty much a one-man band.
And when does one tire of that, and or what are you thinking about career-wise at the time? Obviously, in the moment, you're doing pretty darn well for yourself right out of the gate, right? Which is probably more rare than common. But is baseball didn't hold it for you, at least in the near term, though, right? You were there for too long.
I was starting at 62 through 70 in baseball. Then there was an opportunity in Richmond, Virginia. They were building a new coliseum, and I was somewhat of a rink rat, and I was approached to be the business manager for the brand new hockey team in town. We were an affiliate of the Philadelphia Flyers, and it was quite challenging to sell ice hockey in the South, but we did it, and we had a lot of fun.
All right, so how do you make the jump to hockey? I mean, obviously you've got some familiarity with it, but you're trading one sort of minor league development system for another. How does one make that jump? Given, I guess, almost a decade, I guess, or so in baseball, like how do you get the gumption and or the courage to kind of not only jump from what I'm guessing was sort of a stable and progressing kind of career in baseball into a new sport, a new market, a new everything, frankly?
Tim, basically, when you're running a team, the only thing that really changes are the numbers and the game. You still have to have concessions, radio, television, advertising. The size of your staff grows. You travel by plane instead of bus, but it's the same basics wherever you go, major league or minor league, but the times have changed. For instance, at the Richmond Braves, there were 4 full-time people. I think if you look at the current team that's in Richmond now, they probably have 25 or 30 folks working at the ballpark. It's become more sophisticated. The demands are greater now. But let me see, with the hockey team, there were 4 of us in the front office. That was it.
Just 4 people doing marketing and sales and all of it.
All of it. Yep. We had a small group that worked with the owner of the team. They called themselves the group. They were a bunch of volunteers that we tapped into that had marketing and sales experience that would meet with us weekly and give us ideas and show us how to execute things around town. And we even televised games in Richmond.
All right, so give me a sense of what Richmond is like, both not only the team, but but this brand new arena at the time, which was called what? The Richmond Coliseum, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Very good, Tim. Richmond Coliseum.
Not a hard guess, frankly, but sometimes you never know. Okay, but this was, so you were, the Robins were a brand new franchise in the AHL or relocated?
Relocated from Quebec. They were the Quebec Aces that relocated to Richmond, and we had a name the team contest, and it was juried by the Richmond newspapers. And even though the name of our owner last name was Robbins, the best name that came up was the Richmond Robins, meaning the bird. And the research showed us that there was only one other team in professional sports named the Robins, and that goes back to Brooklyn, New York. There was a baseball team called the Brooklyn Robins at the time.
And I think either directly or indirectly evolved into the Dodgers and what's now the LA Dodgers, if you sort of go through all the branches.
Yeah, and we it was an interesting experience, especially traveling with the team and learning how other coliseums work, so I could come back and help educate the people at the Coliseum for quick turnaround, so it wouldn't take several days to go from ice to basketball to a concert. So the owner sent me to Boston, and that's really where I learned a lot about turning around and going from one sport to the other, from hockey to basketball and vice versa. And then we did the same thing in Chicago when we were in the MISL and NASL for indoor soccer, covering the ice with Homasol, putting down a carpet, and then ripping it up, and the Bulls would play at night or the Blackhawks would play at night.
All right, I'm going to get to Chicago in a minute, but before we get there, I want to go back to, so you're now, though, you're the main tenants, though, I'm guessing, with the then fledgling ABA Virginia Squires, aforementioned, the Earl Foreman entourage there, but I guess also college basketball too, right? Richmond, VCU probably.
Well, Richmond had just opened up a brand new facility as well. VCU was using the facility on occasion, but the Virginia Squires, history will tell the story that they were a regional basketball team, which was something unique at the time for a professional team. They played in Richmond, Hampton, Norfolk, and Roanoke. And that's where I got to meet Earl Foreman.
Interesting. So only a certain number of those games were being played or shared, if you will, in the Richmond Coliseum. And I'm guessing this was, so if memory serves, the Squires actually got their start as the Oakland Oaks, and we've had Pat Boone on this show talking about those interesting 2 years. But the Washington Caps is what they became in the year prior, I think, to the Virginia Squires. I'm guessing maybe this regional concept was sort of born, maybe sort of emanated out of the Washington, D.C. experience prior, right?
Well, actually, I want to get back on track. The Virginia Squires were basketball. The Oakland Oaks were hockey that Charlie Finley had and moved around.
I'm talking about the Oakland Oaks of the ABA.
Okay, Oakland Oaks of the ABA. And then I guess Earl Foreman and his guys bought the franchise.
That's right.
And moved it into the Richmond market. Earl was not unfamiliar with sports because he and his brother-in-law were involved with the Philadelphia Eagles, then later the Flyers in Philadelphia. And Earl, some of his history goes to the Baltimore Bullets, where he was involved. And then sold, I believe, that to Abe Poland, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, and I think where I was going with that was that the Caps, not to be confused with the Washington Capitals of the current NHL, but the Caps were the 1 year in between the Oakland 2-year experience in the ABA and what became the Virginia Squires. And my guess is that's around the time where Earl was, I guess, trying to right the ship, if you will. That team was not drawing in D.C., really. And I think perhaps maybe it was sort of the gateway to this Virginia concept that you're mentioning before, which, in some respects is either ahead of its time. I would argue, the Carolina Panthers of the NFL today, probably very regional in their, obviously domiciled in Charlotte, but, they really do fancy themselves as marketing to the entirety of North Carolina and even South Carolina for that matter. But yet, at the same time, also quite a folly, right? Because, it's hard enough to get people to come to a fledgling league. And we talked to the late, great Dennis Murphy on a couple of occasions about the ABA and the origins of that. And he's, hustler number one, right? I mean, you're truly trying to get people to come to a game in a new league and see these new players in this new thing that's not the NBA, let alone try to get them to go to a couple of different arenas and try to remember which arena they're playing in. That's got to be doubly hard.
Well, Earl asked me to become his marketing director with the Virginia Squires, and I turned him down at the time.
So would this be simultaneous with your ice hockey stuff, or you would have had to make the jump?
No. He wanted me to come with him full time. Matter of fact, his general manager housed an office in the Richmond Coliseum, and it's Johnny Kerr, the former Chicago Bull.
Sure.
We became good friends at the time. And Johnny's the one that came to me and he said, Earl would like for you to go to dinner with him, and he wants to offer you a job. So we went to dinner and we talked, and I said, Earl, that's not for me. And he says, well, what job do you want? I said, Earl, I don't want to sound braggadocious, but I'd like to run your entire organization for you. He said, how am I supposed to tell my investors that I've turned a multi-million-dollar sports team over to a 20-something? I said, just tell him he's good. He knows what the heck he's doing. I mean, I was a little brash and cocky at the time, but I felt confident that I could do it.
Wow. Well, that clearly puts you on his memory books, right? For down the road. So how does the AHL thing play out? And I get a sense that how long were you in Richmond, and then how do you then get to Chicago? Because I think that was your next stop, wasn't it?
Yes, next stop was Chicago, and it was the Paul Richards connection after Bill Veeck bought the team. And I called Paul and I said, Paul, I'm ready to get back into baseball. He says, well, I'm going to tell Veeck all about you. And as soon as the deal gets done, give him a call. So the deal got done in late 1985. And I called Bill on a regular basis and we set up an interview in Chicago, and the rest is history.
75, I think, right?
Yeah, you're right. I said 85. I apologize.
That's all right.
Yes,
I don't want to miss those 10 years because there are a couple of questions I've got for you there.
Okay, go for it.
But describe for our audience, and I mean, most people listen to the show know who Bill Veeck was, but for the uninitiated or the youngins out there, I mean, what's the impetus for you to call your friend knowing that a guy named Bill Veeck is buying the White Sox?
Well, to me, Bill Veeck, I had read his books. He was the master showman. And that was one of the best angles I had to get back into sports, was back through Paul Richards. And the White Sox were a big market. And I was ready to rejuvenate my career in baseball again. And Bill was a very liberal owner. He was a guy that wanted to have fun, and that transcended to his son Mike, who's written a book about baseball called Fun. So we had a lot of fun in Chicago. It was considered the world's largest outdoor saloon.
But you also knew, though, that Bill Veeck was, how can I best describe this? Not sort of universally loved by the bulk of the owners in Major League Baseball, especially those who came from money or looked at baseball as more of a dalliance from their other business pursuits and whatnot. I mean, Bill Veeck was sort of almost an originalist in that he was only a baseball guy, right? So not as deeply pocketed by any means, certainly a lot more showy, perhaps brash, depending on your perspective. But that feels to me, if I'm putting words in your mouth, more of the allure, frankly, than anything else to work with him.
Well, that was part of it. Pat Williams and I started out in the business I did in 1968.
All right, I'm sorry. Let me stop you there. Describe who Pat Williams is, because he's an important guy.
Pat Williams just retired as the co-founder of the Orlando Magic. Pat started out as a minor league baseball player in the Phillies organization, ran the Spartanburg Phillies, and he went to the Philadelphia 76ers, Chicago Bulls, Atlanta Hawks, and then was a co-founder of the Orlando Magic. And Pat's been somewhat of a big brother mentor and was an acolyte of Bill Veeck's. And I knew this. So I called Pat and he says, by all means, go to work for Bill. You can learn so much and it'll just be a boost for your career. And that was just a reassuring factor. But to be back with Paul Richards was always fun. So we made the leap.
Okay, I want to get to your next stop in a second, because it's really important and obviously more the bullseye for our sort of area of focus. But I cannot allow you to go any further without talking about sort of the White Sox in this period of time. We're talking, what, 75, 76, 77-ish?
Correct.
And that was, describe for our audience a bit about sort of what Veeck and you were sort of doing and bringing to the table, because you were breathing and injecting, I wouldn't call it new life, but maybe it was a different sensibility, shall we say, to the White Sox at that time, in visual ways, in promotional ways, and all kinds of ways. Maybe a little bit of a before and after kind of thing, maybe you could, for our audience to know. Because we talked about online a little bit of something in particular that stood out and still stands out to this day, even though it was for a very, very short, note the word, period of time.
Well, my first night out for dinner with Bill was with an entourage of close to 20 people. We went to a neat rib joint in Chicago, and Bill said, sit next to me. And he says, Charles, we haven't made all the changes we want to make, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be intimidated by the new folks that come in. He says, I don't want you to ever feel intimidated. Do what you believe is right. So I started doing things that were right, that were a little unorthodox for some of the people at the ballpark.
Such as?
Such as, Bill asked me to do a complete critique of the ballpark operation.
This is the old Comiskey Park with its many layers of decades of paint and you know, not the most modern facility even in the 70s.
Well, I did that critique, wrote it up, and somehow the critique got leaked, and I wasn't a very popular guy because I was pretty critical of things that needed to be done at the ballpark by a lot of the staff, not so much the baseball staff, but the staff in general that did the day-to-day at the ballpark, from cleaning to plumbing to electrical to on-field. And I spoke the truth. Bill said, that's what I wanted you to do. Then they started making changes on that side. I started, Bill had me even sell television time for a while when things weren't going well. But my primary function was in the farm department. I was, if you want to call him, the assistant farm director. But all of us with the White Sox had two jobs. We had a day job, and then we had a night job. And my night job was sitting next to Bill with 3 telephones and a walkie-talkie and doing his bidding, whatever needed to be done at the ballpark.
Interesting. So it was almost like an assistant to the president, so to speak, by night.
Well, it was in a titular position, but everybody had dual jobs. During the day, you might have sold tickets, but at night, you may have run the scoreboard or were an assistant to the PR guy. This is how you really learned. We were young and hungry, the new bunch that came in.
Where did this young and hungry bunch come from? Did they self-select and reach out and just, travel and show up at his doorstep, or were there other people that he corralled into the mix, or like who were your peers, so to speak, and where were they coming from?
Well, Roland Heeman was already there as general manager. He brought in a new traveling secretary, Glenn Rosenbaum. Glenn was a batting practice pitcher, was in the White Sox organization. Most of the young group came in via Mike Veck and Rudy Schaefer. Rudy was Bill's right-hand man for many years with many ventures, and they put together a group called Rudy's Rascals. And they did most of the selling of tickets and groups and keeping things together on the sales side of things.
Tell me some of the more memorable promotional things that either you were part of creating or helping execute during your time. I know you left before 1979's infamous Disco Demolition, which I don't think many people want to necessarily take any credit for. But before that, though, a couple of uniform things and some other craziness there that weren't historically Sox things until you guys arrived.
Yeah, one of the things that I was responsible for, Bill asked me if I could come up with some form of a sliding pad that the players could roll up in their socks and slide on when they were wearing shorts. That was one thing, and it was a matter of testing, cutting up some different pieces of foam rubber and putting them in there. Probably the most innovative thing on the baseball side was an electric jacket for, we made one for Brian Downing, and then we made one for a left-handed pitcher. He calls me at home and he says, Charles, you know, the team's going out to the West Coast to Oakland, and it's going to be a little chilly out there. I've got an idea for a jacket for a pitcher. Do you think that you can make one up like this? So we started getting people up. We got a hold of a pitcher's jacket, and we got the electrician there, went out to a drugstore, got a heating pad. We had that put into the shoulder and around the scapula and the elbow. And then we had the electrician come in and wire in a plug with a 100-foot cord. And we made it to the plane by noon the following day to go out to the West Coast.
So it sounds like you're it's almost like an evolution of an electric blanket, but for a pitcher to keep warm in a jacket form.
Exactly. That's what it was. We made two of those up, one for a left-hander and one for a right-hander. I was not involved too much with the on-field gags and stunts, as Bill would call them. I was involved in some of the skullduggery behind the scenes. One particular thing, Gene Michael, the general manager of the Yankees, was there with a walkie-talkie talking to the Yankees dugout, positioning players from the upper deck. And Bill said, Charles, make sure that Mr. Michaels gets plenty of concession service. So we got every concessionaire coming up and blocking Michael's view of the field. Then the following day, I was asked if I could locate the walkie-talkies in the visitors' clubhouse, which we managed to do and bring upstairs, and brought in somebody from Zenith and got the crystal settings, put the walkie-talkies back, then had a big Bearcat scanner so we could listen in on what was going on over the walkie-talkies. That was some of the monkey business we did behind the scenes.
There's all kinds of monkey business. But I gotta circle around the shorts, even though you were in the room, at least, I guess, around those. Those lasted a couple of games, right? Do you have any idea as to how that sort of evolved? Those, it was only for two games, right?
No, I think it could have been for more games than that, but the new White Sox uniforms were the ideas of Mary Frances Beck, Bill's wife. And I remember sitting at the executive house one night with Roland Heeman and Bill, And we kept getting the people at Wilson Sporting Goods out of bed at all hours of the night and talking on what we wanted. And every time we would get it to where we wanted, someone would come up with a different idea of the look of the uniform. So away we went with a different look. But yeah, that was the look of the White Sox for the 1976 season.
Yeah, those
Shorts.
were very stylized, very sort of bold, navy blue and white, almost contrasting, the helmets and all that kind of stuff. But the shorts really stood out. There's just, it actually, it's interesting. You look at the pictures of them and you see, I'm trying to remember like some of the players who, Chet Lemon maybe had a pair on or something. Dick Kessinger perhaps. It seems so outlandish, yet it actually seems so logical and practical at the same time. And
well, Tim, it really wasn't new to baseball, but it was new to the major leagues. I think the idea was sparked out in California. They were called the Los Angeles Stars. And if one goes back into their history books, you'll find that they played in shorts. Now, if they were a semi-pro league or what league they were in, I'm not sure. But I believe that could have been the genesis of the idea, and then bringing it to the major leagues in a professional manner.
That's really interesting. All right, so tell me then how the Chicago Sting comes into your radar. You're obviously making a big splash in the third largest market in the country with the White Sox, and perhaps still even in the shadows of the Cubs, or was it relatively equal? I mean, obviously the Southsiders have always had have always been kind of I don't want to say in the shadows of the Cubs, right? But always they oftentimes have gotten short shrift despite even being better on the field and better run sometimes than the Cubs and stuff. But clearly you're making a mark as one of the top guys in the Sox organization. I'm guessing Lee Stern noticed that you were making some hay.
Lee Stern was an investor in the White Sox and still is to this date. Lee would come into the farm office every game he attended and would want to know what's going on in the farm system. And we talked, and I knew he was soccer, and he brought a fellow to a game one night by the name of Clive Toy. And was telling me about
on this very show, for sure.
Really? Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Clive was a neat guy. And rumors started circulating that the Sox were going to be sold to Ed DeBartolo, Sr. And Lee came in and he says, "Hey, kid, I don't know if you're going to have a job when this team is sold, but you've got one with me if you want to come and try something different." So I did. I went with the Sting as director of operations and worked my way up to president.
What year was this that you joined the Sting?
Late 1979. Matter of fact, Lee was in London and he hired me over the telephone, and the team was playing in Mexico.
And what was your knowledge about soccer and the NASL and the Sting in particular before saying yes to this job?
Probably zero. I took the approach that, hey, you still got to do all the right stuff off the field, but it's a different game on the field. And we went in and cleaned house within 6 months and got people that wanted to work, that were willing to turn that franchise around. And a lot of the people we brought in went on to very prominent positions in professional sports.
Well, yeah, you're also coming in at a time. So it's just, for background, and some of our soccer purists will sort of know some of this story, but the Chicago Sting and the North American Soccer League, I think by most accounts, I think Lee would say the same thing. We've been on and off with him to get on this show. He's had some health issues over the last couple of years and stuff, but hopefully, hope reigns supreme to have him on. But we've talked to others about the Sting, Willie Roy and Mike Conklin and some others, on the press side. Yeah, the team, I guess, could be characterized as the boom was really starting to hit in the NASL, 1977, 78 with the Cosmos in particular. Probably, I guess, perceived to be underperforming relative to their size and stature in the market or in the United States, obviously Chicago, and an owner in Lee Stern who had been there for, geez, I guess he was at it since 75 or so, putting money and publicity and really sort of being perhaps one of the movers and shakers in the league. And the city really, for whatever reasons, really wasn't responding, despite some really good play and, frankly, a budding rivalry with those very said Cosmos, which the league thought was very healthy.
Well, Willie Roy was a big factor in getting Lee to open up the purse strings for players. They had some good players, don't get me wrong, but Willie wanted to put together his type of team, which was a primarily all German team that was supplemented with some other English players and Argentinians and Haitians. But I got to give Willie credit for putting that team together. He did a marvelous job. As far as drawing people, I brought in a psychologist, if you would, and wanted to get a feel for who the audience could be, should be. And the way the story went, I learned that when a father comes home to talk with his son, he was only talking baseball, football, and hockey. And he wasn't talking soccer. So the light went off and said, we've got to start targeting our advertising and marketing to females. Maybe that's where soccer moms came from. But we started drawing. Our female demographic went up to 48% that started attending games. I was asked one day, how come I'm not buying advertising in the different ethnic communities? I said, those folks are already coming. They know about the team. So let's start marketing in a different direction. And we brought on some brand new sponsors that were sort of in second and third place in the city. And we started growing. We started playing. And 1980 was a learning curve. And then 1981, it all came together with a new front office, great team, and just came together well.
And came together well. You're burying the lead because they won the soccer ball in Toronto that year, 1981, and yours truly was at that game as a Cosmos fan and was just stunned at the fact that the Sting would defeat the mighty Cosmos. But I digress. Tell me, though, about it seems to me that part of your challenge was where the team was playing because you had to share. I mean, there was the Comiskey and Wrigley Field thing, right, where you had half the season in each of those places, and then Soldier Field for a couple of years. Describe that to me because I think that was also part of the maybe the sort of traditional sports fan confusion as to just where the hell they're playing this year.
There was no problem getting a lease to play at Comiskey Park. With Lee on the board of directors there, Comiskey Park was accommodating. If the truth be told, I don't believe that the Cubs really wanted us on their field, but through some political connections, we'll say, they opened the door to us for an unlimited amount of games. And then when they saw us selling out games at Wrigley Field and what it brought in parking and concession revenue, we got to ride in the front seat of the car, so to speak, as opposed to being a redheaded stepchild and sitting in the back seat. So we proved ourselves that we were a viable sports entity in Chicago.
Was there a preference in the league in the team office as to which facility was a better environment, or did you feel perhaps that you were alienating fans, or you think maybe you were regionalizing and getting the most out of the market by being in two venues?
I believe Wrigley Field was a very comfortable fit because of the size and dimensions of the field. Comiskey Park, if memory serves me right, we didn't have to play on as much of the infield, but still the fans were a distance away in the right center field area. It was almost midfield. So they came, and we put on a show for the fans when they would come in. Everything from elephants to dancing. Let me see, the honeybees. We had a mascot and giveaways. So we had to do a lot of hustling with the team.
All right, what's this? 417 helmets. My goodness. Well, you've heard me talk about 417helmets.com, collectible helmets and more on this very show fairly often. Our pal Judd Lesher down in southwest Missouri, I think in the Springfield, Missouri area, if I'm not mistaken. What is it? 417helmets.com. Well, first, if you dig all of our great football stories and episodes of the past, and you'd like to commemorate some of them in mini helmet form, really cool, sort of literal high quality, professionally, made materials, but in a mini format that you could put on your desk or put on your in your bookshelf or whatever it is, and just about every league that's ever existed, saved from the NFL. We're talking XFL, old versions of. The WFL, remember the World Football League? How about various teams, both current and past, in the Canadian Football League? But also NCAA teams of yore and NAIA college football teams of yore. All of them and many, many, many more available for you at 417helmets.com. But that's not it. That's not it, friends. There's plenty more to be had. How about mini baseball helmets? Yeah, a whole bunch in the Negro Leagues, and yes, officially licensed by the Negro League Hall of Fame. You can get a bunch, and they're making more all the time. And by the way, custom helmets can be made too, both of the baseball and the football variety. You got your business, maybe a promotional thing you want to do for your company, perhaps your organization, you want to raise some funds, all that kind of stuff. Great custom approaches to both mini football and mini baseball helmets can be made at your command for you to enjoy and to sell or resell or give away. All of that and more. That's the more part at 417helmets.com. It's collectible helmets and more. And we've got a promo code for you, too, for whatever you purchase. All of them, all of your purchases, 10% off all of those when you use the promo code GOODSEATS. Again, promo code GOODSEATS for 10% off all of your purchases at 417helmets.com. Thanks, Judd, and thank you all for listening and trying them out. And now back to our conversation. What was your impression of the North American Soccer League? I know everything was new to you, but obviously you're going into not only a new sport, but a new league and organization that the Sting was part of. I not to put words in your mouth, but, the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, I would say it was cresting maybe in the late 70s, and you were kind of getting involved with the Sting, maybe sort of at the tail end of that crest, and then maybe the Sting were they kind of outperformed just near when things were starting to fall apart.
I think, Tim, you can divide the two things on the field and off the field. You had a lot of committed ownership in the league. You had the quality of people like Lamar Hunt. You had Nelson Scalabania up in Calgary. You had the solid ownership up in Edmonton. Both of those guys wound up with NHL franchises. You had Lipton Tea involved in the league. Of course, Warner Brothers was involved with the Cosmos. You had some wealthy owners out on the West Coast. In my opinion, and they had great marketing folks in New York with the league office. But in my opinion, what hurt the league was the owners overspending in an attempt to emulate the National Football League. They were trying to emulate that, and they were trying to do it too quick, and they were throwing a lot of money at it. And not too many clubs were earning money at the time. Tampa Bay was an outstanding franchise.
Yeah, including, though, to your point, the rapid expansion to, 24 teams by 78, 79. We've done a lot of reverse sort of history, sort of trying to, obviously, clearly a major point in the inflection and then the deflation of that, but emulating sort of that coast to coast kind of national footprint, maybe a little before the league itself was too ready for that. That sounds right out of the NFL playbook.
That could be a possibility. They had good ownership out on the West Coast. San Diego, we had San Jose was drawing well. Vancouver was outstanding up in Canada. Great ownership up there. And Los Angeles, did they have one or two teams at the time?
There were the Aztecs, and for a while there was the California Surf in Orange County.
That was it. That was it. Went out on the West Coast several times to watch the team play, but we televised games too. Now, we looked at televising games in Chicago as marketing. We would take marketing money, buy airtime on WGN. I said, Lee, if we're going to go for it, let's do it right. Let's get with a sports network that knows sports. And WGN at the time was the place to be. And it was expensive, but This was home
games you were talking about?
Road games.
Oh, road games. Okay, that makes sense. Because back in the day, that it wasn't enlightened then to broadcast home games to the home market, right?
No. And we also brought in a Spanish network on radio. And we found a 200,000 watt FM station so we could speak to the world, WXFM. And matter of fact, we brought in a fella from WCFL by the name of Chuck Swirsky to do the games our first year. Chuck's gone on to greatness. He was a great broadcaster. And we tried to do the right things. And we had a great chemistry of front office people. And I believe in that chemistry approach, that the team on the field is the team on the field, and the team off the field has to work with the team on the field. And we had that cohesiveness. And I believe that was a great breeding for success.
But I get the sense, though, that, if I remember the 1980 season, both NASL and Sting-wise, I mean, Sting, a couple of things. Number one, the Sting always seemed to have the New York Cosmos' number, right? Talk about a rivalry. It was a very strong rivalry. And more often than not, the Sting would, no matter how well or the Sting were performing in a particular season, would always seem to have the Cosmos number. That was also pretty good. But I guess the question really is, you were still not really drawing that well, even though I think you won a division championship in 80 and clearly were on the path to something great in 81. But I got to think there was a level of frustration that fans were still not sort of coming out at some of the larger numbers that you were seeing in some of those markets you just talked about.
Well,
Chicago's a tough market for sure, so I'll give you that.
Oh, sure. The 1980-81 indoor season, we were playing to crowds of 17, 18, and 19,000 for indoor games.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because this actually, that's the prelude, because that was the season before the 1981 outdoor NASL title, right? This is indoor season? Okay. And this was, just for our audience, this was the, obviously nostalgists know that the NASL experimented with the indoor game as early as 71, 72 with tournaments and stuff. But this was like the first real attempt to go head-to-head, if you will, with the MISL, which had kind of pioneered the game anew in 78, 79. This is the NASL version of the Sting playing at Chicago Stadium, right, indoors.
That's right. It was a brand new experience, and Bill Wirtz was a great partner to work with. Bill was smart enough to see the advantages of doubleheaders in his building, parking, concessions, and he was a true Chicago sportsman. And we played a lot of matinee games in the Chicago Stadium. Let's face it, at the time, the stadium was not in the most popular area in town. So by playing matinee games, we felt that families would feel safer in coming. And that worked out perfect with the Blackhawks, who would play on Sunday nights. And kids could come to the matinee games and then get home in time to go to school on Monday. So we did that quite a bit too. And matter of fact, we were outdrawing the Bulls and the Blackhawks at the time at the Chicago Stadium.
Yeah, so describe a little bit of that, because that was clearly folks like the Atlanta Chiefs, for example, were outdrawing indoors more than they were outdoors. They were more successful there. But this was even a level above that, because you were outdrawing, as St. Louis was in the MISL, outdrawing some NBA and NHL teams on their own right as well, selling out that building. But describe that, because the Sting were quite a phenomenon in the Chicago Stadium. And by the way, probably aided and abetted by the fact that the Blackhawks were not doing all that well generally anyway, too.
Well, we took a little bit of what Bill Veeck taught us and brought that onto the field at in between halves. And we brought Nancy Faust over. She was playing for us. We found a singer by the name of Wayne Mesmer, and we started singing God Bless America. We started having marching groups at halftime. We had sheep penning. We brought in the chicken from a baseball environment and hung him upside down so he could write on the glass. We turned it into a fun place to be.
Yeah.
And the media was great too. The media treated us like darlings.
Yeah. And so I put this in context, right? I mean, the outdoor season, you had won the Central Division. You were in the playoffs in 1980 outdoors. You were drawing, I think, like almost 12,000 people a game. But indoors, you're drawing, some pretty big crowds, which obviously bled into the next season after you won the outdoor championship. I got to think it's also really important to remember too. Not all NASL outdoor teams were playing indoors, right? There had to be a decision made. I know the league was championing the idea, but I'm curious, when did you and Lee and others in the Brain Trust recognize that, hey, we should try indoors?
Well, we started looking at the economics of it, and we had the players under contract, and Willie said, let's go for it. It's another way of keeping these guys in condition, and let's play. Let's see what can happen. So we went for it.
Were you surprised at how quickly it took the indoor game versus that of outdoor?
Not really. We called it, and it's an old cliche, indoor pinball, the excitement, the action. By now, the momentum that we were picking up from the 1980 season in creating awareness for the Sting was beginning to crest. We were on radio, we were on Spanish radio, we were on television, we changed advertising agencies, we took a different approach to our marketing. We brought in some outside ticket sales people, and we were picking up momentum. There was a learning curve for all of us, meaning the new folks on the front office team. But then we started pulling it all together, and it started clicking.
So describe 1981 outdoors, because it seems like you had some rolling thunder there. And I'm also curious as to how your managing of selling, if you will, two different sports in two different seasons. Was this a boon, having a year-round kind of thing, or was it exhausting and divisive and challenging because they were kind of two different products and times of the year?
We started selling the 1981 season during the 1980-81 indoor season while people were exciting. And we did the same thing while we were riding high in the outdoor season in 81. Towards the end of that season and going into the playoffs, we started selling the indoor. So we kept catching the wave, so to speak, from one season to the other and just rode it.
Describe to me the 81 outdoor championship parade in Chicago, because I think I'm sure Lee was probably stunned by it, and maybe you as well, for sure, having been with the team for a shorter period of time. But as I said earlier, right, this was a team that had been in the league for relatively quite some time, had really not gotten a lot of toehold, at least attendance-wise, until fairly recently, right, that indoor season prior, and I guess that magical playoff run that ultimately culminated in the championship in 81. But the whole, I mean, you look at the pictures, Jane Byrne and the city really came out and celebrated this championship team that I guess had been the first time that Chicago had a champion in anything for a long time.
Well, there was an ultraman by the name of George Hagopian. Him being Armenian, me being Armenian, he kept coming by and asking what he could do for the Sting. And I said, George, I'll let you know when you can do something for me. And that went on for the whole season and really didn't need the political contact downtown. And when we knew that we were going to Soccer Bowl, this was after we beat San Diego in a shootout, had 18,000 walk up and had close to 40,000 at Comiskey Park on a cold, rainy Monday night. George came to me and he says, cousin, are you ready for me to do something to you? I said, yes, George. If we come back from Toronto and win Soccer Bowl, I want a parade and big party. Long and short of it, the rest is history. George met us at the airport as we were coming in from Toronto and greeted the team. And we delegated the relationship to Connie Kowal. And Connie coordinated the parade, the party, and all of the doings that were going on. We give Connie credit for that and making it happen.
But you look at the pictures and stuff. That was I wasn't living in Chicago at the time, but that was significant. That was major league status, that celebration.
Well, there was also another big piece of that too at Daily Plaza. We had been negotiating with Karl-Heinz Granitza, our star player, and there was, is he going to stay? Is he going to leave? And we told people that there would also be, along with the parade and everything, a major announcement. And we had Jane Byrne make the announcement that Karl-Heinz Granitza had signed a multi-year contract and was going to be a Chicago Sting for another 3 years. So that helped. But I'll tell you, it was just one big party. And ABC televised the game, although it was on a DB in Chicago and New York. We were upstaged by Love Boat and Fantasy Island, and that's another story unto itself.
Yeah, the delayed broadcast of that game. ABC had really thrown in the towel after 2 years of doing the Soccer Bowls live. They went tape delay on that.
Well, we knew the ratings. Roone Arledge was running things at that time at the network. And actually, there was a sportscaster because WLS was an owned and operated station. And there was a broadcaster there who became a big soccer fan. His name was Tim Weigel. And Tim took the network on during his sports show. How could you delay broadcasting in New York and Chicago? So they were actually going to DB the entire game until Sunday. And the compromise, and Vern Lindquist, who broadcast the game, got involved. And the compromise was we would get a DB as soon as Love Boat and Fantasy Island was over with. the game would play in the New York and Chicago markets. And the rest of the country got the game on Sunday.
Very interesting. Having been at the game, I was not sort of aware of the dynamic there. But yes, I was very much aware of the fact that it was going to be played on a Saturday evening and then run in tape delay on a Sunday. But yeah, for those two markets, and but the radio broadcast was also very popular too. That was not delayed.
No. Actually, we carried the game on 3 different stations. We felt that we had an obligation with our regular partner, XFM, our Spanish station, and WGN came and wanted to take over everything. And we said, where were you folks when we really needed you? But we'll sell you a feed. And they put Roy Leonard on with, I think it was either Swirsky or Kenny Stern did the game on GN. So we had 3 stations broadcasting that game, plus ABC. So again, more momentum into the marketplace.
All right. So when does the end of the Sting for you come about? How does it come about, and how do you make the jump to the MISL? I'm guessing your indoor exploits with the Sting didn't hurt your appeal to the newly resurfacing Earl Foreman, who's now head of the MISL at this time.
Well, Earl called me and he said, look, the league is after me to bring in a deputy director, to have someone there in the event I have to leave for whatever reason. And he said, think about it. Just think about it. So I talked to a few friends, and I really knew that it was time for other members of the family, in the Stern family, to get more involved in the day-to-day operation. And I knew that was going to happen. I got along great with Kenny, Danny, and Jeff, the daughter. It was great. But I knew that Kenny was the heir apparent to take over the club. So I called Earl and I said, Earl, what do you have in mind? He says, I don't want to leave Lee without a general manager president. I'm going to set up a swap. You for Doug Verb, so he's not left hanging. You let me take care of that end of it. And then we worked out a financial arrangement and the other parts of it. And Earl took it from there, called Lee and worked it out. And they swapped me for Verb.
Interesting. I didn't see that in the agate of the transactions that day in the newspaper. But
that was one that got by a lot of people.
Well, that's why I sort of jokingly said MISL Mafia, because there's a lot of sort of trading of people behind the scenes, and Michael Menchel was sort of part of that too, and some others I've heard of. But okay, so explain to me what you thought you were getting into with the MISL. What was Earl selling you to do? What was your role? And then tell me about Phoenix and the Inferno, because that seems like just a crazy story in and of itself.
I think at first, Earl thought that I was going to come in and be a form of marketing guru for the league. And I told him, that's not what I want to do, Earl. My strengths are in marketing, but more in team operations. So he had me on the road 5-6 days a week visiting franchises and showing the general managers and owners how to strengthen their operations.
So like an internal consultant almost.
Yeah, pretty much so. And also franchise expansion was part of it. And just troubleshooting and putting out fires, whatever it took. And Earl was teaching me, he was negotiating a union contract with John Kerr was his name. Was the head of their union.
Sure.
And I was actually putting out fires between owners too. Earl didn't want to get in the middle of owner fights, so I would fly in and break up arguments between owners. And the most memorable one was in Baltimore between Bernie Roden and Bart Wallstein. They were arguing over camera positions for an indoor game.
Wallstein was the Cleveland Force guy, right?
Yep. The game was already going to be broadcast on the USA with Al Troutwig.
Yeah, and Kyle Rote Jr., another guest of ours. We want to get Al, by the way.
There you go.
That's if you have any inroads to Al Troutwig, we'd certainly appreciate.
That's a Michael call. I think Michael can find out for you.
I will ask him.
Anyways, I flew in and I said, guys, look, our contract with USA says that they get prime camera positions. Why don't you guys each take a feed and save yourself a lot of money? No. I want people in Baltimore to see what I want them to see. And Bart says, I want people in Cleveland to see what I want them to see. So I said, okay, guys, this is how it's going to work. And it's going to work very simply. USA is going to pick out their camera positions. I'm going to flip a coin, and then we're going to go back and forth for what camera positions are left. It was that simple, just flipping a coin between the two owners.
So is that the garden variety version of the spats that they had, or was it even more so, like the direction of the league and that kind of stuff?
Well, the direction of the league, there was a board of directors, and probably one of the more influential guys who wound up becoming commissioner of the league was a good intermediary for Earl, and that was Bill Kentling in Wichita.
Sure.
Bill got along well with all the owners, and he had Earl's ear. So I look at Kentling as a guy that quelled any storms before they became tornadoes.
Okay. Well, or fires into infernos. So explain the Phoenix Inferno story and situation, because this sounds like a humdinger. And maybe perhaps, I don't know, maybe the more notable example of what you're trying to do is literally try to, and figuratively, I guess, put out fires.
I get a phone call from Earl. I forget where I was. And he says, meet me in Chicago. We're going to Phoenix. I said, how long should I pack a bag? He says, maybe a week or two. Okay. I meet Earl in Chicago, and as we're flying out to Phoenix, he explains that the following day, the Inferno are going to declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy and padlock the franchise.
Do you remember what year this was? This was what, 82?
82, late 82. And I said, okay, keep talking. He says, we've secured an attorney out there by the name of John Dawson, who was about 6'6", 380-pound guy, big guy. And I'll tell you a story about that later. Anyways, he said, our attorney is going to keep the team out of bankruptcy. The league is going to stand behind the team and make sure the bills get paid. You are going to be appointed trustee of the franchise in bankruptcy. You're going to run this team while we're there. Well, that evening when we arrived in Phoenix, we had dinner with Joe Jr. Garagiola and Joe Sr. Now, Joe Sr.
Joe Garagiola of baseball fame and then later baseball broadcasting fame. He and his son?
Yes.
Okay.
His son was an attorney in Phoenix, and father and Stan Musial had just sold their interests in the St. Louis indoor team.
Of course, the Steamers. They were part of the original ownership group when they came as an expansion franchise. Yeah.
Very good. So we're going to have dinner with them and explain the circumstances and if they would consider putting a group together and buying the team. That was dinner that evening. And then my job was to go in and run the day-to-day, figure out what was going on, where the bodies were buried, and how we could generate some revenue. Well, the best thing we had going for us, besides the league's backing me up if need be, was a $250,000 letter of credit that each team had to put up at the bank. Well, I was drawing down on that letter of credit to pay salaries, travel. Uh, the stadium where we were playing at tried to lock us out. And the federal judge, and this is when I learned the power of a federal judge, said, nope, you guys get federal money to operate this building. This team's going to go in there and play. So that was a big hurdle for us getting into the building to play.
This is the old Veterans Memorial Coliseum, which is still around today, by the way.
Yes. So we went hand to mouth with that franchise. Hand to mouth. There was not an expense that was made without approval coming from me or the accountant that we had on board. Now, that $250,000 letter of credit was secured with a bunch of phony real estate documents. The real estate never existed. So the bank got flim-flammed, but still was on the hook for the $250,000. Well, the team was actually owned, once you drill down, by a group of Cuban drug dealers in Miami. And we found out about this as we got into the process. Matter of fact, the team president came out of Miami, Rick Ragone. Oddly enough, his brakes went out one evening, and him and a family member were killed in a car crash in Phoenix.
And that was in December of 1981, around the time that you're talking about this bankruptcy situation.
Could well have been, but yes, Rick Ragone was killed. A guy by the name of Irv Berger came in from California. And Irv was the guy that put together all of the paperwork. Well, apparently there was money being filtered in from Miami to keep that franchise afloat. Well, the fellas in Miami secured counsel in Phoenix, and they were hauling me into court and wondering why I wasn't selling assets to pay bills. And the federal judge asked me, he says, Charlie, how come you're not selling assets? And I said, Your Honor, would you buy a car with only 3 wheels and no headlights? He says, are you trying to tell me that the franchise is worth more in total than in parts? I said, yes, sir. I believe we can find an owner that will buy the team out of bankruptcy, pay the secured creditors, and the city of Phoenix will have an indoor soccer team. And we started scouring all over Phoenix and interviewing different people that were potential owners. And frankly, the only solid group that was on the radar was the Garagiola group. But the night before we're going into a bankruptcy hearing, I get a phone call from an attorney representing a Bruce Merrill, who owned the cable station there, and said, Mr. Merrill would like to put in an offer for the team. Sure. Bring it to the courthouse tomorrow. Well, Mr. Merrill's offer was $25,000 or $50,000 more than the Garagiola group. So by law, I had to present both offers to the court. The judge called a recess, and he got the commissioner on the phone. And he said, we have 2 offers here, Commissioner. Which one of these groups would be approved by your board of directors? And he said, Your Honor, either one of the 2 groups would be acceptable. Well, under law, the judge had to accept the higher offer from Merrill. And I had to keep my lip buttoned. I mean, the Garagiolas were the better group. Merrill was just buying programming for his cable station. So that's that story. And then I went out to dinner that evening and tried to help Merrill understand what it took to run a franchise. And he asked me to stay and be president. And I said, Mr. Merrill, that would be highly unethical. Me being a bankruptcy trustee and then you getting the franchise, me staying as president. I said, I will give you several names of fellas that will do a good job for you. And he wound up hiring a guy by the name of Podolski. out of California. And he came in, he changed the name of the team from the Inferno to the Pride. And I think they lasted one or two more seasons, and then the franchise folded. And then I went back to Philadelphia in the league office. What I thought was going to be a couple of weeks turned out to be several months.
Interesting. So this, by the way, a quick parenthetical on Podolsky. I guess he was, according to what I'm reading here, he was a devout Christian, and he was the guy, the impetus to change the word Inferno to Pride, which
correct
didn't seem to sort of, although I think they did post their best record of the 3 seasons that they were there. They were 500 that season. But I remember watching an original Inferno game, 1 or 2 of them on the old USA Cable Network with the aforementioned Al Troutwig and Kyle Rote Jr. And I remember back in the day, and this, you youngins out there think this is commonplace now, but I remember literally waiting for a goal to be scored for Phoenix because they had those 2 fire funnels that would light up with fire after the goal. And I always thought that was the craziest thing. And I remember seeing those clips in all kinds of promotional stuff years afterwards, right? Because it was like dramatic and emblematic, frankly, of the showbiz style that the MISL marketing wizards like the Wikis and yourself and others were trying to bring into this league.
That's what it took. You had to sell sizzle if your team wasn't the best team on the field and create an atmosphere that the minor league general managers are doing today. And that's how we sold it. And if you won, it was a bonus.
Yeah, they also had the best bumper stickers in the league, I think. Our balls are off the wall. But I digress. But okay, quick. Let me wrap up a piece or two here, and then we'll do a cul-de-sac to finally let you go back to your actual life here. But so this Ragone was killed in a car crash, coincidentally in late 1981. Okay, I'm reading into this, and I intimated it earlier. But do you think there was any connection with his passing and his untimely death? With the shenanigans of the ownership of this group. And by the way, how did he even get to this point? I mean, where was the due diligence, I guess, in the league office when they were getting the owners in the first place?
I have no idea. That was what we call in my vernacular BC, before Charlie. I was still having a great time with the Sting in 1981 and really didn't keep up with the MISL that much. But Ragone, I understand from talking with Michael, was part of the Miami Dolphins, and that's where the connection started with the potential owners in Phoenix.
I see. Okay.
Now, who did the due diligence? I have no idea. I'm sorry, Tim.
No, nothing to be sorry about, but it's intriguing nonetheless, for sure, right? And this is our first touch of the Phoenix Inferno / Pride franchise. So, all right, tell me then the rest of your MISL career. You said for a few more months.
Yeah, I went back, and Earl had me do a feasibility study. He said, Philadelphia is not the place for the league office. I said, where do you want to go? He said, go to New York first. So I went to New York, did a feasibility study, put an action plan together to shut down the offices in Philadelphia on Friday and reopen in New York City in the Empire State Building on Monday. He had all the lease papers and everything, and all Earl had to do was sign it. He said, you know what? Let's now look at Washington, D.C. I want to go to Washington, D.C. because that's closer to home for me in Potomac. Keep in mind that we had just sold our house in Chicago, moved everything into storage with 2 young kids, and the family was in a small rental home in Richmond, Virginia, and I was commuting from Philly to Richmond. And Earl said, yeah, Washington is it. So I went to Washington, and I found a place across the street from one of Earl's favorite restaurants, his old law office that his wife had told me about. They were moving, and it was a sweet deal on the rent. So I said, Earl, perfect. We can do the same scenario, open up in D.C. He says, I like that. Well, I went home and went house hunting. And my wife found a beautiful home up in outside of D.C., Ravinia, I think it was, and came back to the office. And Earl said, I'm going to put this whole thing on hold on moving the league office. And I said, Earl, my family is worth far more to me than this job. When you figure out where you're going to put the league office, call me. I gave him my keys, my travel card, got a plane ticket, and went home to Richmond.
And that was it for the MISL for you, right?
Yes. In between in there, there. I don't know if you heard about it, something called Team America.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, were you part of that too?
I
Sort
was
of.
the guy that had to blow it up.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Let's end with this and then we'll certainly talk about it because, okay, you cannot escape with teasing that. For our audience, set this up. This is 1983, right? The NASL season's clearly
yes,
it's on its way out, but there was this sort of bright idea that, and not a bad idea actually, a creative one for sure, in trying to get the United States national team either better known or better prepared or both for what was to be the upcoming cycle for 1986's World Cup, newly moved to Mexico. The idea was what? To create a pro franchise consisting solely of U.S. national team players to play in the rapidly declining North American Soccer League. Is that right?
That is true. We worked out all the details with our owners. The biggest concern was disability insurance, if these guys were going to get hurt and who was going to pay their contracts. Gets down to economics. And then Earl Foreman and Marv Samuels met, shook on the deal, and everything was in place. And then they were going to have another meeting in New York with the marketing people, the attorneys. Earl called me up the day before that meeting. He said, I've changed my mind. I don't want anything to do with NASL. I said, Earl, we've shook hands. I know all those people. He said, go to New York and blow it up. I said, Earl, I got to think about this. I know all those people. I went to New York, sat at the table, and I said, guys, before we start, MISL is pulling out of the deal for reasons I can't explain. This is something that Mr. Samuels needs to discuss with Mr. Foreman. And these guys just looked at me. These are guys that I did business with for several years. And I said, guys, I'm sorry. That's all I can say. And that was the end of Team America as far as the MISL was concerned.
All right, so let me back up for a second. So what was the premise? What was the discussion about? So the team had existed for 83, and this was Earl and or the MISL coming in to maybe help take it on or support it for 84?
Supplement the team with MISL players.
Ah, got it. Not ownership, but players or both?
To my knowledge, it was going to be just players, but there were a lot of details involved in getting the players to the team.
Interesting.
And
what this was during the course of the 1983 outdoor season, or was this before the season actually began? Because the team only lasted one season, right?
I think it was early 1983.
Right.
Early 83 as they were getting ready. But that was, and I started seeing a side of Mr. Foreman that I had been told about. And then when the other thing happened about moving the the league office, I said, enough is enough. This isn't my style. So I just said goodbye. Went home to Richmond, Virginia. We had just got through putting the MISL All-Star Game together on CBS. John Tesh, matter of fact, did the game with Al Troutwig, and I just wanted to watch that game. I was involved with Michael in putting it all together, and I said to my wife, I don't want any phone calls from anyone till Monday. So phone calls started. How could you give this up? How could you give it up? And I had a standard answer, Tim, that I'll share with you. My family and friends are more important to me.
And so that was essentially the end of your roaming sports career. Is that fair to say?
On a professional sense, yes. Then I took part of the 83 year off. I had some friends that were in the insurance business that asked me to come on board as a consultant to see if we could develop some insurance plans for sports. And then after that, benefactor from the University of Richmond, who had owned the hockey team, called me and said, look, we would like for you to come on out. We're going to give you a title out there at the university, and we want you to fix the athletic department. So that got me there. And then after that stint at the University of Richmond, I got into the fairs and expositions business for 10 years.
And that's also interesting too from a career perspective, right? Because I as we sort of kind of wind up, and I'm sure we will probably have a part 2 at some point to get to some more granulars on some of these other stories. We didn't even talk about Tony La Russa and the White Sox, so many other things we could get to. But it does seem to me that there is a certain dynamic that one has to have in his or her mind. Getting into pro sports. Now, obviously, it's a different era back then versus today. But you're describing, and I don't know if this is exactly how it played out, but it sounds happy-go-lucky to me, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that, right? Because it's the proverbial one door closes and another one opens. But I think there also is a leap of faith, probably, if I can discern, right? That you have to kind of just believe that things are going to kind of work out and you're following your passions. And frankly, what you just described over the last hour and a half is a lot of that, right? A friend of this said this, and I'm really interested in that over there. And the stuff sort of just kind of, I don't want to say magically happens. I'm sure it was more complicated than that. But, unless you have that sort of belief set, I think it's going to be very hard versus, say, trying to plan this. Because clearly your career path is nothing you could ever plan for, right?
Correct. It was, like you said, one door closed, another one opened, and the right place, right time, working with the right people, getting guidance from some people. And there was a lot of interviews in between for other jobs that I just said no to me. I just said no. I want to settle down now after running around the world. And that was it.
All right, last question then. Because of a lot of the, obviously the stuff that, a lot of this stuff is sort of gets forgotten. I mean, the shorts in the White Sox, right? If you're not a big fan of them, you wouldn't have known about that, or some of the craziness of the VEC ownership and stuff. But certainly when you're talking about a league and a team, or leagues and teams that don't exist anymore, right? That's even harder to sustain memories of. Would you, I guess this is kind of a silly question, but would you have done anything differently? Like, would you have gone to maybe more stuck with the more, shall we say, major established sports? Would you have explored another market? Would you have thought about other things besides sports in the early part of your career? Or would you not have changed a thing and reveled in all the memories and the learnings that you got on the job, so to speak?
I would have probably delved into being a more patient individual, if anything, and as opposed to too spontaneous in reacting to a job offer, maybe thinking it through a little bit more thoroughly, doing more due diligence. And that's a 74-year-old man talking now. I was young, cocky, and just was going for the big brass rings all the time.
but you're also hustling, right? I mean, in a good way, right? I mean, as we've learned with many, many interviews and conversations, some originalists like Dennis Murphy, the original hustler, so we say in sports, maybe Gary Davidson too. There's a bit of there's probably what I call it. I wouldn't call it. There's an allure, right? There's an attraction. There's an excitement. There's a not sure how this is going to play out. There's this sports and entertainment thing, right? If you're young and single, or at least young, and eager and interested in any of those realms and dynamics, this almost seems like catnip. These leagues and these people. It'd be hard for me to avoid it.
When I talk with young people that want to go into the professional sports arena, the first question I ask, what was your aha moment that said, this is what I want to do? And I listen to what that aha moment is to see if they really want to do it, or is it the bright lights that's attracting them? I remember my aha moment was in 1960, playing in a Little League football game at halftime at the Detroit Lions game with 50,000 people in the stands. And I said, wow, would it be great to be part of this? That was my aha moment. And you talk to kids today and you want to know, what do you want to do? What do you really want to do? Because you got to pay your dues in this business to get there today. There's just so many people that want to get involved in professional sports. And I try to steer a lot of these young people towards colleges and universities for a pro sports career. I think it's more stable than some of the sports. Today, Major League Sports, there's a lot of pressure up there to win and make money.
Yeah, a lot of it is a business for sure, right? And it's always been a business, right? But perhaps even more so, I mean, to the point where like private equity and multiple teams and leagues ownerships, right, which was verboten for so many years, right? You can't own a team in two different leagues. A fan ownership and just the sheer gargantuan sizes of these stadiums and the cities that get shaken down for the. I mean, it seems like the stakes are ever higher. And I'm not old man yelling at the clouds here, but there is something, I don't know, that feels like we're losing in the realm of pro sports. And yeah, Lord knows there's lots of sort of early stage, starter type sports that are, no different than the 70s and that kind of stuff. But the money and the business and the money again just seems to be like first and second and third before maybe the sport and the joy of all of it. I don't know. Maybe do you feel similarly, or am I just being naive?
No. Let's put it. Sports has changed with the times. The times are running with digital faster, the bigger and better. Visions are coming into the game. You go back to Mr. Wrigley and Mr. Yawkey, they thought that it was the civic thing to do to lose $1 million or $2 million a year to have a sports teams in either Chicago or New York. But now there's tax advantages. There's an in-house attorney with every franchise. It's big business.
All right, there you go. You could not find a more perfect guest for this little niche of a show. Charlie is not only just tremendous, full of the great stories, a raconteur, great memories, and sharp memories at that, and probably so much more to unearth. Perhaps we'll have Charlie back to do a round two and get into some other fun and nooks and crannies that maybe even he forgot after I do some more research. We appreciate your listening, of course. This is what we like to do for you every week. If there are topics that you're interested in and things that you have questions about that you think we can give you an answer to, or all that kind of stuff, you can send us email by all means, and we're at hello@goodseatsstillavailable.com. And that also gives you a tip that the website, where all of our previous episodes and all of our episodes to come, we just like to store them all there in one convenient place, so that, like, if you've got a friend and you want to tip them off to the show and just give them a little sampler platter without forcing them to add us to their feed, or frankly have to explain what the heck a podcast is. Trust me, we know that painful process sometimes. Goodseatsstillavailable.com. That's the place to go. And you will, or whomever that you push towards that website, will find all of those episodes with, some great imagery. And if our guests have a book or a movie or something that they're pushing, convenient links to all that stuff will be there. It's also the place where you'll find all of our social media feeds, or at least the addresses for such. On Twitter, probably our most active platform. We're at, what's the handle? The handle is @GoodSeatsStill. That's what it is. On Instagram, you'll find us at Good Seats Still Available. And on Facebook, you'll find us at Good Seats Still Available. On that website, besides also a convenient link to the email to as well, if you can't write down the email address, like I said before, you can click on a button there and just send us a note directly that way. But you can also subscribe to our little weekly email newsletter. Someday we're going to enhance it, put some more regularity to it, perhaps some news around this genre that we've created for ourselves once the day job settles down. But as long as the current situation exists, it will be largely devoted to this weekly email newsletter that you can just click around on our website and subscribe to. Just give us your email and your name, and you'll be on the list. It's kind of just a little update. Not update, it's a kind of a little head start to tell you what the episode for the coming week is going to be. And if you want to be on the insiders list to know perhaps a day or maybe just mere hours before we put it on the RSS feed, you could just sign up for that email newsletter, and you will get it, and you will be in the know. Thank you to our fine editor extraordinaire by the name of Dr. Jerry Payne, down in beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, or the nearby vicinity. We've never really established if he's in the city limits or somewhere on the outskirts, but regardless, he's in the metropolitan area for sure. So watch out. Lock up your cars and your doors, and keep the kids and the neighbors away from. No, Jerry's all good and has been with us since the very start, and we cannot, as he knows, and hopefully you all know, do this show without him. And this week is a prime example of such. And thank you, of course, for listening. More great stuff coming your way. Stay tuned for it in the weeks ahead. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, please do so and rate and review us. We appreciate that. That helps us and the algorithm. And we'll look forward to seeing you, talking to you. That's it. Next week. Thank you for listening. See you.